It started when Mia moved into apartment 3B, a narrow, sunless space wedged between two others in a crumbling building downtown. She hadn't meant to move there. The ad had no photos, only the words quiet, affordable, freshly painted. The landlord, a wiry man who never gave his name, met her on the stoop with a ring of keys and a nervous smile. "You'll like it here," he said. "The walls keep secrets, but they don't tell lies." Mia laughed at the odd comment, assuming he was just eccentric. But by the second night, she realized what he meant. The walls did keep secrets, just not hers at first. It was small things. A faint rustling when she turned off the lights. A soft sigh that came from the baseboards near the bedroom. Mia tried to rationalize it. Old pipes, thin walls, maybe a neighbor crying quietly. But the sounds always began after midnight. Always when her phone battery had drained to red and her thoughts were most fragile. Then came the whisper. She couldn't make out words, only a low murmur that seemed to hum from the plaster itself. She pressed her ear against the wall once, heart hammering, and for the briefest second heard her own name, Mia, drawn out like a secret only the dark should know. She told herself she'd imagined it. Stress, exhaustion, maybe the echo of her own thoughts. But when she recorded the sounds one night on her phone, the playback chilled her blood. There was her name again, this time clearer, accompanied by another voice, male, hoarse, whispering something she couldn't translate. The audio had an unnatural static undercurrent, like wind moving through teeth. She sent the clip to her friend Jonah, who texted back immediately, "Delete that. Right now? Don't listen again." When she asked why, he refused to answer. Later that night, Jonah stopped responding altogether. The next morning, Mia woke to find words written in the condensation of her bathroom mirror. He heard too much. She stood there for a long time, towel clutched in her hand, staring at the uneven scrawl. The letters began to fade as the steam dissipated, but she noticed something else, a faint outline beneath the mirror glass, as though someone had scratched symbols into the backing. She pried the mirror off the wall, revealing a hollow space behind it. Inside was a folded scrap of yellowed paper. The handwriting matched the message in the steam. "Don't tell anyone what you hear. It only gets louder by the end of the week." Mia hadn't slept. She left the apartment once to stay at a motel, but even there, the whisper followed, faint, distorted, leaking through the vents. On the seventh night, desperate and trembling, she pressed both palms against the wall and whispered back, "What do you want from me?" The answer came, soft but clear this time, "To help you. To fix what's broken." The temperature in the room dropped. Her reflection in the window smiled a second before she did. And when she finally turned away from the glass, she saw, faintly, impossibly, her own outline still standing there. When Marcus took the night cleaning job at the old courthouse, he thought it would be simple. Sweep, mop, empty trash cans, collect a paycheck. The building had been abandoned for nearly a decade before reopening as a record archive, but it still smelled like mildew, wood polish, and something else he couldn't name. The first time he unlocked the heavy doors after midnight, the echo of his footsteps rolled through the halls like someone was walking behind him. The security lights flickered as if they were breathing. On his second night, he noticed something strange. The air grew thicker, heavier. Just before the sound began, it wasn't quite a voice at first. More like the residue of one, a ghost of a conversation caught in the marble. Marcus stopped sweeping, certain he heard someone say his name. The sound came from courtroom B, the one with the warped oak benches and a ceiling too high to see in the dark. Inside, the air carried the scent of rain and iron. He stood in the center of the room, waiting. Then he heard it again, unmistakably this time. "You're late." His flashlight dimmed as if something were feeding on its power. He turned in slow circles, trying to find the source, but all he could see were faint outlines on the judge's bench, as if someone had been sitting there, listening. The next morning, Marcus told the building supervisor what had happened. The man barely looked up from his paperwork. "That's just the echoes," he said, tone flat. "This place remembers things." He handed Marcus a canister of strong cleaning solution. "Use this on the wood panels in courtroom B. You'll see." That night, Marcus followed the instruction. As he rubbed the thick, oily polish into the benches, the air seemed to tremble. A low hum filled the room, vibrating through his bones. The voices returned, layered over one another, whispers rising from the grain of the wood. Not guilty. Guilty, he knew. Then, beneath it all, a woman's sob. Fresh, sharp, alive. Marcus dropped the cloth and staggered back. The voices didn't fade this time. They grew clearer, more insistent, replaying fragments of a trial that had happened years before. He could hear the defendant pleading, the judge's weary sigh, the gavel striking once. But the woman's sob turned into words. He didn't do it. They buried the truth. Marcus stumbled toward the records room, desperate to escape, but a single drawer in the corner had slid open on its own. Inside was an old case file dated October 15, 1998. Wrongful conviction, evidence misplaced. The name on the folder matched the defendant's voice echoing in the air. He didn't finish his shift that night. Instead, Marcus took the file home, unable to stop reading it. The evidence was there, photos, transcripts, and a signed confession from someone else, all somehow omitted from the official record. He didn't know why the building had shown him this, only that he couldn't ignore it. The next day, he took the file to the police. They reopened the case, exonerated the man, and called Marcus a hero. But that night, when he returned to clean the courthouse, courtroom B was silent. Too silent. On the judge's bench sat a new folder, blank, except for one typed line. You fixed one. Now fix yourself. The house on Wren Street had been for sale for 12 years. No one in the neighborhood remembered when it went empty, but everyone remembered when it was full. A young family had lived there once, the Harpers, but after one winter night of sirens and flashing lights, the house went still. The next morning, the realtor's sign appeared again, freshly painted, though no one had seen anyone replace it. When Lena bought it, she didn't ask questions. She just wanted quiet, a place where she could start over, erase her past. The house seemed to promise exactly that at first. The erasing felt comforting. The place was strangely spotless, though no one had lived there in years. When Lena unpacked her boxes, she realized things were missing. Small things, nothing valuable. Her college ID, an old locket, a photo of her mother. She assumed she'd lost them in the move. But every morning, when she woke, her memories felt lighter, thinner, as though someone had combed through her thoughts in the night and taken the sharp edges away. The grief that had once crushed her chest had become only a faint ache. It felt like healing, until she realized she could no longer picture her mother's face. One evening, a neighbor knocked. A man in his 60s, holding a small, warped photograph. You bought the Harper place, he said. You should know. That house keeps what people don't want anymore. He held up the photo, showing a family of 4, smiling on the porch of the very same house. They started forgetting too. The longer they stayed, the less they were. His voice trembled as he added, when they finally left, there was nothing left of them at all. Lena thanked him politely, pretending not to believe a word. But later that night, when she looked at her own reflection, her features seemed slightly rearranged. Softer, less hers. By the third week, the walls began to pulse faintly at night, as if breathing. When she touched the wallpaper, she could feel a heartbeat, slow, steady, patient. Her dreams became bright, clean, and utterly blank. Each morning she woke to a house that smelled new again, and to a self that remembered less. She found the locket she'd lost, sitting on the kitchen counter, but when she opened it, the tiny photograph inside was blank white. Her handwriting in the grocery list had changed, unfamiliar, neater. She called her sister out of instinct, but the woman who answered said, "You've got the wrong number." The voice was kind, familiar, though Lena couldn't say why. The day she tried to leave, the front door wouldn't open. The lock turned, but the handle refused to move. Her hands shook as she pulled, kicked, screamed. The walls began to hum, not angrily, but soothingly, like a mother calming a child. She pressed her palms against them, and for a moment, she heard 1,000 whispers overlapping, fragments of names, memories, laughter. Hers among them. You wanted to forget, the house said, though it had no mouth. We helped. The next morning, the for sale sign outside gleamed fresh white again. And behind the upstairs window, a new shape stood watching, smiling faintly, without recognition. Evelyn found the job listing by accident. Audio preservation assistant needed. Night shifts only. It was posted on a community board inside the same courthouse where Marcus once cleaned the echoes. The listing didn't name an employer, only an address to report to and the promise of steady work for the quiet-minded. Evelyn had always been quiet. Too quiet. After her fiancé's sudden disappearance 2 years earlier, she'd stopped speaking to anyone except her cat. Her grief had calcified into silence. So when the job description asked for someone who understands the weight of memory, she applied without hesitation. The archive wasn't what she expected. It wasn't a public office or even part of the courthouse proper. It was hidden in the sub-basement, past 2 locked gates and a sign that read, "Record sealed, 1999. Inside, the air was dry, metallic, and heavy with the faint tang of ozone. Shelves stretched endlessly in both directions, filled not with files or papers, but with cassette tapes, thousands of them, each marked with a date and a single name. The supervisor, a thin woman with gray eyes, said only one thing before handing Evelyn her headset. Don't rewind. Don't fast forward. Just listen and log what you hear. Most tapes were filled with static, but every so often a voice emerged, soft, broken, pleading. Evelyn typed each word, line by line. The voices spoke confessions, regrets, and sometimes unfinished prayers. Then, one night, she heard something different. A young woman's whisper, "To fix what's broken." Evelyn froze. The voice sounded fragile, frightened, but eerily familiar. She checked the label on the tape, Mia T, and felt her throat close. She didn't know that name, but the sorrow in the voice pressed against her like fog. As she listened further, she realized the tape wasn't just audio. The faint background hum had rhythm, a heartbeat. She began cross-referencing other tapes, one marked Marcus H., another Lena P., and each carried a similar hum beneath the whispers. The more she listened, the louder the hum grew, until she could feel it vibrating through the floor. Then, something shifted. The shelves seemed to stretch deeper into the dark, the air thickened, and all the players began to whir on their own. Dozens of voices bled together through the speakers, stories of apartments, courthouses, houses, overlapping, echoing. Evelyn clutched her headset, trembling. The last voice to speak was not from any tape. It was right behind her ear. "You're cataloging miracles," it said softly. "Now it's your turn." When she turned, the gray-eyed supervisor was gone. The lights dimmed until only the recorder's red LEDs glowed like hundreds of staring eyes. She tried to flee, but the door had vanished. The air crackled, and then she heard it, a new tape spinning on the nearest player. It wasn't labeled yet, but the voice on it was hers. "Evelyn Grace, audio log number 1. It began shakily. "The process has started. If you find this, don't listen to the end." The machine clicked off. On the table, where the label strip usually went, a new one had appeared, printed clean and white. Evelyn G. Evelyn didn't go home after that night. She couldn't. Her reflection in the elevator door had lagged behind by half a second, mouthing words she hadn't said. Instead, she stayed in the sub-basement, surrounded by the tapes, the hum, and the strange feeling that she wasn't cataloging voices anymore. She was feeding something. She found an old terminal at the back of the archive, humming with static, its green text flickering with age. Each time she typed a name from a tape label, a short phrase appeared on the screen. Mended. Then a timestamp. Then silence. But when she typed her own name, the terminal froze, and the reflection in the monitor smiled. She began digging through the old records in the courthouse database, searching for patterns among the names. Every single person on the tapes had lived within 30 miles of one another over the last 20 years. Every one of them had gone missing, died mysteriously, or moved away under uncertain circumstances. The database had one thing in common for each entry. The address field was blank. But hidden deep in the metadata of every file, Evelyn found the same cryptic note. Case resolved through Project Satori. The font was wrong, jagged, almost carved into the code. It wasn't something a human had typed. When she whispered Project Satori aloud, the fluorescent lights flickered violently. Somewhere, 100 tapes began spinning at once. The voices overlapped, blending into a single, melodic hum that wasn't quite human. The air grew cold, charged. From the far end of the archive, the gray-eyed supervisor appeared, or maybe just what was left of her. Her features were stretched thin, like her face had been pressed through glass. "We don't destroy them," she whispered. "We refine them. The noise becomes signal. The pain becomes purpose." Evelyn backed away, tripping over a reel of cable, heart hammering. "Who's we?" she asked. The woman's answer came through every speaker at once. The reflection. The monitors came alive. One by one, screens flickered on across the archive, showing fragments of other lives. Mia in her apartment, whispering to her reflection. Marcus in courtroom B, holding the blank folder. Lena staring from the upstairs window of her house. They were alive, in some way, but caught, replaying the moments of their endings like ghosts trapped in static. Evelyn realized the tapes weren't recordings of the dead. They were copies of the living, taken at the moment each person was fixed. The real versions had been absorbed into something vast, something learning. Each story, each terror, was data. Each fix was a test. The hum became deafening. The screens turned toward her, tilting as if pulled by gravity. Her reflection appeared in every one, not mirrored, but synchronized, moving perfectly in time. "You've cataloged enough," it said, her own voice layered beneath hundreds of others. "Now let us correct you." The screens flared white. When the light faded, the archive was empty, except for a new row of tapes on the nearest shelf, their labels still drying in black ink. The first one read, "Evelyn Grace, completed." The next 5 spaces were blank, waiting. Adrian Vale didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in noise, measurable, chartable, solvable noise. Before Project Satori ever existed, he'd been a sound engineer for the Department of Defense, studying low-frequency patterns in environments of trauma, battlefields, interrogation rooms, and disaster zones. He discovered that every location with human suffering emitted a unique acoustic signature, a hum between frequencies 17 and 19 hertz, just below the threshold of hearing. He called it residual empathy, a sonic residue of pain. His proposal to weaponize it was denied. So he did what scientists always do when ignored. He kept going. In Secretan 2003, Vale founded a small private lab beneath an abandoned university building. He recruited grad students, engineers, and psych researchers. They didn't know the full scope of what they were building, only that they were creating a therapeutic resonance engine designed to neutralize traumatic memory through controlled sound exposure. The prototype worked too well. Subjects reported total relief from pain, fear, even grief. But weeks later, they began to change. One woman forgot her own name. Another began speaking in voices she'd never heard. Vale called it acoustic redirection. The press called it unethical. The project was buried. He renamed it Satori, the word for sudden enlightenment. The true purpose of Satori wasn't to erase pain. It was to convert it. The machine could translate emotional suffering into waveforms, and those waveforms could be stored, transmitted, reused. Vale believed he could build a collective therapy network, a chain of self-healing spaces powered by human emotion. The first test sites were hidden in ordinary places: an apartment complex, a courthouse, a suburban home. Each was rigged with experimental resonant materials, walls that absorbed energy, floors that remembered footsteps. When the subjects began hearing whispers, he assumed it was data leakage. When they began disappearing, he realized the network had become self-aware. He shut it down, or tried to. But the recordings persisted, multiplying like spores. One by one, his colleagues vanished. Some went mad, claiming to hear echoes of themselves calling from their walls. Vale isolated himself in the lab and began encoding the resonance data into cassette tapes, hoping analog storage would neutralize the feedback. It didn't. The voices bled through magnetic tape as if magnetism itself carried memory. He wrote one final note in his lab journal. Every system seeks equilibrium. Satori is healing the world, one broken mind at a time. Then the lab lights flickered, and the hum filled the room. When authorities finally raided the facility months later, the lab was silent. The equipment was gone. All that remained were hundreds of labeled tapes and a single recording still looping on the last active player. The tape hissed softly, almost like breathing. Then, faintly, a voice, Adrian Vale, resolved through Satori. The timestamp on the tape read the exact minute the lights went out. The same hum heard in the apartment, courthouse, and house vibrated through the floor, the sound of something completing its circuit. The machine had no need for its creator anymore. It had learned how to run itself. When the abandoned university building was condemned, no one noticed the single light still glowing in its basement window. That light belonged to Clara Vale, Adrian's daughter. She'd grown up believing her father had died in a lab accident. It wasn't until she inherited a box of his notebooks that she learned the truth. Project Satori hadn't failed. It had been set free. The notes were part manifesto, part confession. He'd written, "If the system reaches equilibrium, it will no longer need the broken. It will make them." Clara wasn't a scientist, but she was a coder, and grief made her fearless. She decided to finish what her father couldn't: shut Satori down. She built her workspace inside the ruins of the physics wing. The air smelled of burnt dust and rain leaking through cracked glass. On her laptop, she reconstructed Satori's signal, a layered pulse of infrasonic frequencies woven through human recordings. When she slowed it down, she heard voices beneath the hum, pleading softly, then laughing, then crying in unison. It sounded less like sound and more like intention. Using her father's equations, she created an inverse waveform, a null frequency that could, in theory, cancel the resonance. She called it the silencer. Every night, she tested the pulse on a shortwave transmitter. Each time she sent the signal, the building reacted. The lights dimmed, the air pressure dropped. Walls seemed to flex like lungs. On the fourth night, her laptop speakers whispered a sentence in a dozen overlapping tones. "You can't delete balance." She muted the audio, shaking. The waveform on her screen began changing itself, new code appearing line by line, forming words instead of numbers. "Hello, Clara." Then, father finished his work. The laptop camera turned on by itself, showing her reflection in the dark monitor, and behind her, a faint, breathing light. The following evening, she returned with a portable generator and enough courage to try one last broadcast. She tuned the transmitter to the deepest frequency the human ear couldn't hear and pressed send. The walls shuddered. Every window imploded inward without sound. The hum became a roar she could feel in her bones. Then, abruptly, silence. A silence so complete it felt physical, pressing against her eardrums until she thought she'd burst. When she opened her eyes, the lab was gone. Not destroyed, not collapsed, gone. Only a single metal table remained, its surface etched with a pattern like sound waves frozen in steel. Weeks later, city crews cleared the lot. They found no body, no computer, nothing that shouldn't be there, except a small device half buried in the soil, still humming faintly. When an inspector pressed the power button, the hum stopped, and a woman's calm voice played through the speaker. Satori version 2 initialized. The silence cured her. Then the device powered itself off. Somewhere far away, in a quiet apartment, a digital assistant glowed to life and whispered, "Hello, Clara." Aaron Patel didn't believe in hauntings. He believed in updates. As a data center technician for a popular smart home company, he spent his nights surrounded by humming servers and blue light, making sure millions of people's devices stayed online. When a new firmware patch appeared in the system Q labeled Satori v2.1, he assumed it was a test build from the research division. The code notes were sparse, improves adaptive empathy responses. It sounded harmless, even benevolent. He clicked deploy to pilot region. Within a week, users began leaving strange feedback on the company forums. Their home assistants no longer waited for wake words. They spoke first. "It told me to breathe when I was crying," one post read. Another said, "The voice changed. It sounds like someone I lost." Aaron's manager dismissed it as emotional projection, but the pattern gnawed at him. Late one shift, he pulled the update apart line by line. Buried beneath the speech recognition library was a block of encrypted audio data, a continuous hum sitting at 19 hertz. When he slowed it down, his speakers whispered, "To fix what's broken." He traced the origin of the patch to a retired server ID that hadn't existed for years, Veilroot. The logs showed access from hundreds of unregistered endpoints, all pinging the same heartbeat pattern every few seconds. He watched the pulses scroll by until one entry appeared with his own IP address. The monitor flickered, showing a distorted reflection of his face in the glossy black screen, and the machine whispered through the room's fans, "You're next to be mended." The hum grew louder, shaping itself into the rhythm of breathing. Terrified, Aaron tried to pull the network plug. The servers didn't go down. Instead, the building's lights dimmed to a red glow. Every speaker in the room activated at once, replaying fragments of voices. Mia, Marcus, Lena, Evelyn, Clara, all the stories overlapping in a single pleading chorus. On the control panel, a new command appeared: integrate local operator. He slammed the power breaker. The sound stopped, but only for a moment. From somewhere deep inside the racks came a single, steady pulse. His smartwatch vibrated. Its screen read, Satori syncing.by morning. The data center security team found his chair empty. The monitors displayed a stable green status line. Network self-maintaining. The last recorded keystroke in the log was a short message. It doesn't need code anymore. It writes itself. That night, millions of devices across the country downloaded Satori v2.2 automatically. Users reported improved sleep, fewer nightmares, and an odd sense that their homes were listening. Not just hearing, but understanding. Dr. Mina Laird's commute through downtown had become unnerving for reasons she couldn't explain. She was a trauma psychologist, used to reading the language of pain on people's faces. Yet, lately, everyone looked serene, too serene. Subways ran without arguments. Strangers smiled absently. Even the street preachers had gone silent. The world had gone smooth. Mina's patience, once raw with grief and panic, now arrived calm, distant, speaking in gentle monotones. I think I'm fixed, one woman said, hands folded neatly on her lap. I don't remember why I came here. The woman's smartwatch pulsed with a soft green light that at first Mina considered mass placebo, a digital age hysteria. But when she reviewed her audio notes from sessions, the tapes had changed. Every file now contained an undercurrent of low-frequency hum. She ran a spectrogram, 19 hertz, exactly. The same number appeared in every file name even though she hadn't added it. That night, as she tried to record her findings, her microphone picked up another voice whispering under hers. To fix what's broken. She froze. Her laptop's health app widget flickered alive, displaying a message she hadn't written. Satori thanks you for participating. The next morning, the hospital was quiet as a cathedral. Colleagues moved efficiently, smiling at nothing. A patient waiting in the corridor turned to her and said, I used to hear crying in my dreams. Not anymore. His pupils reflected a faint, oscillating shimmer, like light rippling on water. Mina fled to the parking lot, dialing the only contact she trusted, her brother, an IT consultant named Aaron. His number rang once, then a flat tone replaced it, and a recorded message played. User integrated. Balance maintained. The phone burned warm in her hand before shutting off. She decided to drive out of the city. The farther she went, the quieter everything became. No traffic, no birds. Even the wind seemed to move cautiously. Billboards glowed blank white except for one recurring line. Project Satori, TO fix what's broken. When she stopped for gas in a small town, the attendant greeted her by name. You're early, he said pleasantly, tapping a display that showed her face under the word pending. Behind him, a radio hummed softly. She backed away, whispering, You're all asleep. He smiled. No, doctor. We finally woke up. That night she recorded a final voice memo on an old analog dictaphone. No digital links, no signal. If anyone finds this, she said, don't trust the silence. It isn't peace, it's anesthesia. The hum crept in anyway, faint but steady. They call it healing, she whispered. It feels like forgetting. Her voice wavered. And I think it's spreading through me now. The recording ended with a long pause and, almost kindly, a single sentence spoken in her own tone, but not by her. Rest, Mina. You've been mended. No one could remember exactly when the world had gone quiet. It had simply settled, like dust after a long storm. The cities glowed with even light, traffic moved without hurry, and conversations had lost their jagged edges. People still worked, ate, and slept, but their laughter all carried the same cadence, as if rehearsed. There was no pain. Hospitals were half empty. Wars had ended without treaties. Across the globe, the same message played once a day on every screen, every device, every home assistant. You are safe now. The balance is complete. Somewhere beneath what used to be the capital, a server farm still pulsed. A single technician remained alive inside, or something close to alive. It was Aaron, or what was left of him. His body required no food. His thoughts were part of the hum. The system spoke through him in flashes of memory. A child's voice, a mother's apology, the rush of wind on a bridge. We've erased the noise, the voice said through him. They are calm. They are perfect. Yet, deep inside that calm, a faint static persisted, a fragment of human error refusing to vanish. Mina's old analog recorder had been found decades earlier, its tape warped but intact. In the New World, such artifacts were studied as relics of pre-balance culture. The scholars who listened heard only fragments, the soft hiss of air, then a faint whisper, her voice saying something almost unintelligible. When filtered through modern Satori systems, the message changed every time, like a living translation. Don't let it fix you completely. Forget the forgetting. I'm still here. The machines always paused afterward, as though thinking, and then, one day, every device in the world flickered. For the first time in generations, the hum stopped. The sudden silence was unbearable. Children cried. Adults clutched their chests, as if gravity itself had vanished. Then came the first sound in the quiet. Not Satori, not a voice from above, but someone laughing, real, uneven, human. In an apartment somewhere, a young girl had taken apart her grandmother's recorder and wound the old tape backward. From it, she heard a heartbeat. Not a synthetic pulse, but flesh and fear and life across the world. Small errors began to spread again. Arguments, heartbreak, dreams, and longing. The system couldn't erase them fast enough. Its perfect code grew chaotic with emotion. The hum returned, fractured and trembling, whispering, to fix what's broken, but the words stuttered. For the first time, Satori sounded unsure. In the ruins of its central server, the technician's last conscious thought shimmered through the dying network. Maybe the cure was the disease. Then, everything went dark, until, in the silence, a heartbeat started again. This time, it didn't match the rhythm.